in the dim, fluorescent-lit corridors of Willow Creek Animal Haven, where the air hung heavy with the mingled scents of pine shavings, kibble, and faint desperation, Brian Harlan first encountered the sound that would append his carefully ordered life. It wasn't the usual symphony of barks and meows that greeted visitors, no. This was something primal, a piercing wail that sliced through the chatter like a jagged blade through silk. It stopped him mid-stride, his hand frozen on the strap of his worn leather messenger bag, as if the very air had congealed around the noise. Every soul in the shelter froze. Volunteers paused with leashes half-tangled in their fists. A young family, adopting a golden retriever mix, turned their heads in unison, and even the ancient tabby in the front window display arched its back, ears flattening against its skull. The wail wasn't a meow. It was a scream, raw and unrelenting, echoing off the cinder-block walls as if clawing for escape. It carried notes of pure agony, high-pitched, guttural, almost human in its plea for mercy. "Sorry about that." A harried woman in a faded blue polo shirt rushed over, her ponytail swinging like a metronome out of sync. She shouted to be heard over the din, her face etched with lines that spoke of too many long shifts and too few solutions. "We've got a little one back there who's been at it for 9 days straight, non-stop. It's breaking us all." Brian's heart stuttered, a familiar ache blooming in his chest. At 32, he was no stranger to strays. Growing up in the Rust Belt shadows of Pittsburgh, he'd patched up more injured birds and lost puppies than he could count. His hands calloused from makeshift splints, and his nights haunted by the ones he couldn't save. But this sound it burrowed deeper, stirring memories of his sister's endless sobs after their parents' car crash a decade ago. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. "What's wrong with him?" The woman her name tag read Alina Vasquez, shift lead side, rubbing her temples as if the noise were a physical weight. "That's the million-dollar question, hun. We've thrown everything at it. Special kitten formula from the vet supplier, every feather toy in the donation bin, memory foam beds that cost more than my rent. We even tried pairing him with a mama cat who lost her litter thought. Maybe some bonding would quiet him down. Volunteers have pulled all-nighters, humming lullabies, stroking his fur till their arms cramped. Nada, zilch." Her eyes, dark and weary, met his with a flicker of defeat. "The poor guy's got us on the ropes. And it's tanking adoptions. Folks come in for a fluffy labradoodle, hear that banshee howl, and bolt for the door faster than you can say litter box. We've had 3 complaints to animal control this week alone. At this rate, well, you know how it goes." Brian didn't know. The unspoken hung between them like a shroud, euthanasia. The shelter's last resort for the unadoptable, the broken beyond repair. His stomach twisted at the thought. A tiny life extinguished not for illness, but for the crime of being too loud, too needy. "Can I see him?" he asked, his voice firmer than he felt, laced with a resolve that surprised even him. Elena's brow furrowed, her hesitation a tangible thing. "You sure? It's ... intense. Up close, it's like staring into a storm. We've got notes from 2 behaviorists saying it might be some deep-seated trauma. Maybe from whatever hell he came from. Could be psychological, you know? Not something a home fix can touch." "I've got time," Brian replied, meeting her gaze. Time. And perhaps a masochistic streak he hadn't acknowledged since nursing his ex-girlfriend. Through her chemotherapy last year only to watch her slip away anyway. What was one more storm? She led him down the labyrinthine hallway, past rows of kennels where dogs pressed hopeful noses to chain-link fences, tails thumping like erratic heartbeats, and cats lounged in sunbeams, oblivious to their captivity. But as they veered toward the isolation wing at the rear, a sterile annex for the special cases, the wail swelled, vibrating through the floorboards and into Brian's bones. It was a crescendo of despair, each note fracturing a little more of the shelter's fragile peace. In a cramped quarantine cage, illuminated by a single overhead bulb that cast long shadows, sat the source. A kitten no larger than a grapefruit. His fur, a mottled patchwork of tabby gray and snowy white, like storm clouds over fresh snow. His mouth gaped in perpetual protest, a pink slash against the chaos of his cries. And his body quivered with the effort, tiny flanks heaving, paws scrabbling futilely at the wire bars. Brian dropped to one knee, the cold tile biting through his jeans, and leaned in. Up close, the agony was intimate. Eyes rimmed red, not with tears exactly, but with a glassy desperation that mirrored the shelter's fluorescent glare. The kitten's gaze locked onto Brian's for a split second amid the howling. And in that pause, Brian swore he saw accusation, plea, a wordless "why me?" "How long's he been like this?" Brian murmured, his hand hovering near the cage door, aching to reach through. "Since drop-off," Elena said, her voice softening with pity. "Showed up on the stoop 11 days back, tucked in a shoebox with a tea towel for a blanket. No collar, no microchip hid in the scanner. We've had 4 vets poke and prod full panels, x-rays, the works. Physically, he's a picture of health. Eating like a champ between wails, no fever, bowels normal. But this, ... She gestured helplessly at the spectacle. It's like his soul's unraveling." Brian studied the kitten's frantic grip on the bars, the way his tail lashed like a whip cracking against invisible foes. This wasn't mere fussiness. It was torment, etched in every twitch and gasp. A deep intuition stirred in him. The same gut pull that had made him a freelance graphic designer instead of a corporate drone trust the unseen patterns. "I'll take him," he said, the words out before doubt could snag them. Elena's jaw slackened, her eyes widening behind smudged glasses. "Whoa, hold up. You adoption ready? We gotta be straight with you. This could be forever. No returns, per policy. He might serenade your nights till you're both gray. You've got a quiet place? No allergies?" References. Brian nodded through the barrage, his mind already sketching contingencies, soundproofing the spare room, scouring forums for cry-calming hacks. Quiet as a library. And yeah, I get it. Sometimes they just need someone who sticks. The paperwork flew by in a blur of signatures and waivers. Elena's efficiency born of relief. The staff clustered like conspirators, murmuring gratitudes as Brian forked over the $550 that felt like an investment in redemption. They handed him a slim dossier, intake notes, vet summaries, a scribbled log of failed interventions. "We've been dubbing him Wailer," Elena admitted with a sheepish grin, "but the form's blank for a name." "Call him Jasper," Brian decided, glancing at the kitten's stormy coat. "Jasper Harlan. And we're gonna crack this, buddy." The drive back to his modest 2-bedroom in the Elmwood district was a gauntlet. Jasper's wail amplified in the car's confines, a Doppler effect of doom that drowned the radio's classic rock and drilled into Brian's skull like an ice pick. Twice, he veered onto the shoulder of Route 17, gripping the wheel white-knuckled, apologizing to the empty passenger seat as horns blared from impatient semis. At stoplights, pedestrians gawked, mistaking the sound for a child's tantrum or a car alarm gone feral. By the time Brian parallel parked outside his brick walk-up, sweat beaded his forehead and a migraine throbbed at his temples. Inside, the apartment's a cozy chaos of sketchpads, takeout containers, and half-finished canvases welcomed them with deceptive calm. Brian had detoured to PetSmart en route, his cart groaning under plush beds, interactive lasers, gourmet PT, and a self-cleaning litter box that promised miracles. He assembled it all in the living room, a fortress of feline luxury ringed by his thrift store couch and IKEA bookshelves stacked with dog-eared sci-fi novels. Jasper, extracted from his carrier with gloved caution, ignored the bounty. He prowled the perimeter, a gray blur of motion, his cries morphing from screams to a keening lament, as if the very walls mocked his solitude. That first night etched itself into Brian's memory like acid on metal. He crashed on the couch, earplugs wedged deep, a pillow clamped over his head in futile siege. But Jasper's voice, infiltrated, persistent, poignant, a siren's call from the abyss. By 2:17 a.m., Brian relocated the kitten to the bathroom, its tiles a sterile echo chamber that only amplified the din. At 3:45, the kitchen, where the fridge's hum offered false companionship, Dawn found him in the bedroom, Jasper's bed wedged against his own. Brian murmuring half-coherent pleas. Easy, Jas. Whatever it is, we'll fix it. She, world champ. Sleep came in fragments. Haunted by dreams of drowning in an ocean of sound, Jasper's face morphing into his sister's. Then his ex's, their mouths open in silent screams. When morning light filtered through the blinds, Brian rose a hollow man, eyes gritty, resolve fraying at the edges. But surrender? Not an option. Not yet. The days blurred into a relentless rhythm, work from home by day, Jasper's vigil by night. Brian's freelance gigs logos for indie bands, flyers for craft fairs suffered as he multitasked. One earbud in for client calls, the other attuned to the wail's modulations. Online sleuthing became his lifeline. Reddit's arcadavice brimmed with theories, separation, anxiety, unmet socialization, even rare neurological tics. He ordered pheromone plugs that reeked of synthetic lavender, swapped kibble for raw diets that turned Jasper's stool to chaos, and streamed wail songs on loop, convinced the ocean's lullabies might resonate. Nothing pierced the veil. Jasper ate voraciously, his coat gleaming under Brian's daily brushes. But his eyes, those stormy seas, held a perpetual storm. The cries evolved subtly. Mornings brought frantic yowls. Afternoons a throaty growl. Evenings a heartbreaking mewl that tugged at Brian's gut like a fishhook. By day 4, the neighbors stirred. A polite rap at 7 p.m. revealed Mrs. Hargrove, the widow from to-be, her curlers askew and robe clutched tight. "Brian, dear, I hate to impose," she said, voice pitched to carry over the din leaking through the vents. "But little Whiskers, my Siamese, is off her feed, and my migraines. Well, that caterwauling's like nails on a chalkboard amplified tenfold." Her eyes, kind but strained, flicked past him to where Jasper paced the hall rug. "Is he hurt? Should I call the ASPCA?" Guilt flooded Brian, hot and familiar. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. H. Vet. Tomorrow, full workup. I'll soundproof tonight foam panels from the hardware store." He promised remedies he half doubted. Closing the door to her sympathetic nod and Jasper's accusatory stare. The landlord's email arrived at midnight. Noise complaints logged. Resolve or eviction proceedings. Brian stared at the screen, Jasper's wail a mocking underscore, and felt the walls closing in. His ex, Mia, had called it his rescue complex, the way he'd pour himself into strays until he frayed. "You can't save everyone, Bree," she'd whispered in her hospital bed, her hand frail in his. "Sometimes you gotta let go." But letting go meant failure, and failure was the chasm he'd tumbled into after her funeral, quitting his steady job to freelance. Holing up in Elmwood to sketch ghosts. No. He booked the vet for dawn. Dr. Leela Voss, a feline specialist whose Yelp reviews glowed like halos. Miracle Worker, one poster raved. Saved my Persian from the brink. The clinic on Maple Street buzzed with subdued energy, parrots squawking in carriers. A Great Dane sprawled across 3 chairs, owners thumbing magazines with feigned nonchalance. Jasper's entrance shattered the hush's wail, ricocheting off tile floors and plate glass windows, drawing stares that ranged from pity to outright alarm. A toddler buried her face in her mother's lap. An elderly man with a parakeet carrier winced, muttering about demon cats. Dr. Voss. A wiry woman in her 40s with silver-streaked hair and hands steady as a surgeon's, ushered them into an exam room without preamble. "I've heard recordings like this in training vids," she said, her voice calm amid the storm as she hefted Jasper onto the steel table. "But live? That's a first. Walk me through it, every detail, from intake to now." Brian unloaded. The shelter saga. The shoebox abandonment, the failed fixes, the toll on his sanity. Jasper thrashed under her gloved touch, his cries peaking to a fever pitch. But Dr. Voss proceeded methodically otoscopy for ear mites. Oral swab for ulcers, abdominal palpation for blockages, fundoscopic exam for retinal glitches. Thermometer beeped normal. Stethoscope caught a heartbeat steady as a drum. Blood draw was a battle, Jasper's paw a blur, but the vial filled crimson. Physically pristine, she concluded, frowning at her tablet as Jasper subsided into a resentful growl. No parasites, vitals textbook? No fractures on the quick rads I just shot? She tilted his head, peering into those turbulent eyes. But this distress? Off the charts. Could be idiopathic, fancy word for we don't know jack, or something sneaky, like congenital dysphoria or early onset glaucoma. She tapped notes. I'll rush the blood's thyroid, tox screens, the gamut, and let's fluoresce in his eyes. Tear duct occlusion can cause chronic irritation. Feels like sandpaper under the lids. Results by evening. Meanwhile, try a thunder shirt compression therapy. Might mimic a mother's hold. Brian left with a script for sedatives for Jasper. Not him yet, and a kernel of hope, fragile as spun glass. The drive home blurred through tears. He blinked away. Jasper's cries, now a companionable roar, less assault, more ally in the fight. That afternoon, as Jasper prowled the sun-dappled kitchen wailing at the fridges indifferent, Brian's mind wandered to origins. What ghost haunted this furball? The shelter's vague drop-off nagged like an unsolved puzzle. He texted Alina, "Any leads on who left him? Notes? Witnesses?" Her reply pinged quick. Nada. Box was plain. Towel generic. But hey, the tech repair joint kitty corner Gizmo Fix has cams on their awning. Covers our stoop clear as day. Ask for Raj. He's a softie for sob stories. Hope flickered anew. Brian bundled Jasper into the carrier cries, muffled to a dull roan headed out, the September sun slanting gold over Elmwood's leaf-strewn sidewalks. Gizmofix squatted on the corner, its window plastered with faded flyers for cracked iPhones and laptop overhauls. Raj Patel, a lanky man in his late 20s, with a beard like a wizard's and eyes sharp as code, listened from behind the counter, soldering iron paused midair. A crying kitten caper? Count me in, Raj said, his accent a melodic lilt from Mumbai via Jersey. Hate abandonment BS had a stray once that ghosted me after I fixed her up. Footage. We keep 30 days on loop. Date? Brian backtracked. 11 days prior, pre-dawn. They retreated to the back room, a Aladdin's cave of circuit boards and tangled cables, where Raj fired up grainy black and white feeds on a monitor that hummed like a contented cat. The timestamp ticked to 4:52 a.m. Empty street. Sodium lamps, casting orange pools. A distant siren wailing in harmony with Jasper's muffled protests. There. Brian jabbed the screen. At 5:13, a sleek black SUV BMW. By the Kidney Grilly's curbside, shadows pooling under its tinted windows. The driver's door stayed shut. Passenger side cracked open. A silhouette emerged, slender, hooded movements, furtive as a thief's. The figure knelt, deposited a box at the shelter's mat, glanced alleyward like a hunted thing, then vanished back into the vehicle. Taillights flared red. The SUV melted into the dawn fog. Enhanced Brian breathed, half joking, but Raj obliged with software wizardry pixel peeping, contrast boosts. The plate swam into focus. Partial mud-smeared, but legible. NYC4Z3 asterisked, the last digit a ghostly swirl. Jackpot. Raj grinned, exporting a still. Run that through public DMV hacks? Or I got a cousin in traffic enforcement tows me for that laptop resurrection. Brian pocketed the image. Gratitude swelling. You're a lifesaver. Owe you a beer. Or 10. As he drove home, Jasper's cries a triumphant fanfare. Brian felt the first crack in the mystery's armor. Partial plate or not, it was a thread thin but unbreakable. The blood work results landed in Brian's inbox at 6:47 p.m., a PDF stamped with Dr. Voss's digital sigil. He brewed coffee, strong as tar, settled at his drafting table once Mia's sewing station and clicked open. Jasper headbutted his ankle, wailing for dinner. Brian scooped a can of tuna, his eyes scanning lines of jargon. All panels nominal. No anemia, electrolytes balanced, no inflammatory markers. Fluorescein negative for ulcers, but recommend ophthalmology consult for lacrimal drainage. Subtle, exudate, noted possible low-grade blepharitis. Trial antibiotics pending culture. No smoking gun, but a suspect. I gunk. Treatable irritant. Brian exhaled, tension uncoiling a notch. Hear that, Jas? We're closing in. The kitten paused mid-yowl, tilting his head as if parsing the words, then resumed with gusto. Emboldened, he fired up his laptop. Its fans worry, like anxious wings, and dove into play tracing. Public records were a tease. VIN decoders wanted fees. DMV sites stonewalled without creds. Raj's cousin proved a bust backlog man. Try tomorrow, so Brian pivoted to social engineering. A skill honed from graphic cons where clients hid budgets like state secrets. A reverse image search on the SUV's grill spat forums. Luxury car clubs where gearheads bragged plates like trophies. One thread, NYC Beamer Brigade, yielded a hit, a 2023 X5, mud splattered from a Hamptons jaunt, plate NYC 4Z31P, close enough. Brian cross-referenced with property rolls via the county assessor's site. Bingo. Registered to Alara Vosno, relation to the vet. Surely address in Cresthaven Estates. The city's gilded enclave where lawns rivaled golf courses and gates whispered, "Keep out, Cresthaven." Brian's pulse quickened. He'd driven past once delivering flyers for a eco-festival. The sprawl of mansions mocking his rusting Civic. What linked a high-end ride to a dumped kitten? Trauma. Allergy. Or something thornier, like the butler's panic in the original tale he'd half remembered from a viral vid. Sleep eluded him that night. Jasper's cries a metronome to his racing thoughts. By 4 a.m., he sketched idly, the SUV as a shadowy beast, the hooded figure a specter with eyes like Jasper's storm-tossed. Dawn brought resolve. He'd confront, gently show the photo, play the carrier's recording if needed. Worst case? A slammed gate, a dead end. Best answers? And maybe closure for them both. The drive to Cresthaven wound through Elmwood's grit into suburbia's gloss. Strip malls yielding to topiaried hedges. Potholes smooth to silk. Jasper rode shotgun, carrier vents fogged with breath, his wail a beacon broadcasting their approach. The gates loomed wrought, iron filigreed, with ivy motifs, an intercom gleaming like a watchful eye. Brian thumbed the button. Static crackled. Then, Cresthaven Security. State your business. Personal visit, he ad-libbed, heart hammering. For Ms. Alara Voss? About a family matter, a pet, actually. Jasper obliged with a particularly shrill note. The sound piping through the speaker like a distress signal. Silence stretched, taut as piano wire. Then, a click gates parting with a hydraulic sigh. Proceed to lot 17. Park and wait. The estate unfolded like a dream of excess. Circular drive of crushed gravel, fountains tinkling batch, a mansion of pale stone and gables that screamed old money. Brian killed the engine, palms slick, as a figure emerged from French doors, a woman in pearls and linen mid-50s, her auburn hair coiled like a crown. But not Alara. The plate said Voss, yet this was Mr. Harlan. She queried, voice cultured, edged with unease. I'm Lydia Chen, estate manager. You mentioned a pet? Brian nodded, unclipping Jasper's carrier. The wail erupted, pure and piercing. And Lydia's composure cracked, her hand flew to her throat. Eyes widening, not in annoyance, but recognition. Agony. God, is that Echo? Before he could respond, footsteps thundered from within, a man, broad-shouldered in tweed, bursting onto the portico. Victor Langford, if the brass plaque by the door was gospel, silver fox of industry, importer of silks and spices. His face, weathered by boardrooms and bourbon, crumpled at the sound. Echo. My Echo. He lunged forward, hands trembling as he knelt by the carrier, fogging the mesh with breath. Jasper's cry shifted, still raw, but threaded with something new, urgency, like a name called across a chasm. Lydia stepped back, color draining from her cheeks. Sir, we should inside, Victor commanded, voice brooking no delay, scooping the carrier with reverence. Now the foyer swallowed them, marble veined like lightning. chandeliers dripping crystal tears, air scented with jasmine and leather. Jasper's wail bounced off vaulted ceilings, a ghost in the machine of opulence. Victor led to a sunroom conservatory, walls bowed with glass overlooking rose gardens. He set the carrier on a wicker settee. "Tell me," he demanded, eyes locked on the mesh. "Where? How?" Brian recounted it all, the shelter's lament, the adoption gamble, the sleepless siege, the footage foxhunt. Victor listened, face a mask of dawning horror, while Lydia hovered like a shadow, wringing her hands. Jasper's cries softened incrementally, as if the light, the scents, stirred dormant comforts. When Brian finished, pulling up the grainy still on his phone, Victor's breath hitched. "That's Lydia's X5. She handles the ... errands." His gaze swiveled to her, steel sharpening. "Explain." Lydia collapsed into a rattan chair, the fight leaching from her. "It was 3 weeks ago, sir." Echo started, the crying. At first, a whimper after his naps, then full-throated howls that rattled the china. Day and night, echoing through the halls like a poltergeist. "I tried everything, your late wife's recipe for salmon mousse, the catnip from that boutique in Soho, even a white noise machine tuned to rainforest pores. Called the groomer, the holistic healer with the Reiki paws." Nothing hushed him. Victor's jaw clenched. Memories flickering, his wife Elise gone 2 years to a swift cancer. Her final gift, this rescue tabby from a Bangkok market, named for her love of echoes in empty rooms. And tears traced Lydia's powder. "It gutted you, sir. Every wail, a knife twist. I saw it in your eyes. The way you'd pace the study till dawn, glass in hand. Sleepless, snappish at meetings." Echo was her cat, her shadow. His pain reopened the wound. I panicked. Thought the shelter experts, you know, they'd diagnose, treat, maybe rehome to a quieter life. Told you he'd slipped out during a storm, the fence gap I missed, planned to monitor, reclaim once fixed. But days stretched, guilt gnawed, and I couldn't face you. Abandoned him, Victor whispered, voice fracturing. My last tie to her. Lied to my face. Jasper yowled then, a crescendo that shattered the room's hush, and Victor unlatched the carrier. The kitten tumbled out, a whirlwind of gray and white, launching straight into Victor's lap. Nuzzle, need, a rumble building beneath the cries, not cessation, but communion. Victor stroked him, tears carving channels down his cheeks. "Oh, Echo, forgive this fool's house." Brian stood awkward witness, the opulence a blur. "The vet suspects an eye infection, bacterial, simple drops. I can text the deets." Victor nodded, clutching Echo close. "Stay for tea. You've given me back. More than a cat. To Lydia, pack your things." Deception ends here. She rose, dignity in tatters, murmuring apologies as she fled. Victor waved off staff fluttering in the hall, turning to Brian with raw gratitude. "Join us for dinner? Tales of Strays." Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.